Late Sunday afternoon, Malcolm X was murdered as he was about to address a nationalist meeting at the Audubon Ballroom in Upper Manhattan. Moments later, Malcolm's followers seized one of the gunmen as he tried to escape the scene. Intervening policemen engaged in a brutal tug-of-war to keep the man from being torn to shreds. The cruel irony is that Malcolm was murdered by members of his own race, the very people he was fighting for with his extraordinary abilities. And that is the central theme of this documentary. The telling of this tragedy oft resembles a biblical story or a Shakespearean drama, laden with all the passions that flesh is heir to: love and hate, loyalty and jealousy, unselfishness and greed, morality and debauchery. May we all profit in the telling of this story, resolving never to repeat its grievous mistakes. A superb intellect with exceptional analytical ability, gifted as a powerful speaker, and blessed with a quality that few others have: incorruptibility. Time would show, however, that Malcolm's glaring frailty lay in his blind devotion to the man who had salvaged him from a life of crime, Elijah Muhammad. Elijah then must also be accorded a dominant role here. As head of the Nation of Islam, also known as the Black Muslims, Elijah provided the structure within which Malcolm would develop. But it wasn't destined to last. This powerful alliance of Elijah and his devoted Lieutenant Malcolm X would be split by individuals within the Nation of Islam, as well as by persons working for the United States government, who infiltrated, helped divide, and set the stage for Malcolm's ouster from the Nation of Islam, and then his murder. Malcolm's brother Wilfred, himself a minister in the Nation of Islam, bore witness to this tragic scenario. His narrative will be key to our story. Percy Sutton, former Manhattan Borough President, currently chairman of the Inner City Broadcasting Corporation, was a friend and personal attorney of Malcolm's. Mr. Sutton is one of the few who stood by Malcolm when the going got rough. 6 nights before he was assassinated, an exhausted Malcolm spoke to his followers. His house in Queens had just been bombed. He had been eluding his would-be assassins for the past year. He had been traveling overseas. He had been traveling down south. He was trying to get his 2 organizations moving, and at the same time, he gave as many interviews as possible, making as many speeches as he could, telling as many as would listen about the complexity of elements that would take his life.
As many of you know, Sunday morning about 3 o'clock, somebody threw some bombs inside my house. Normally, I wouldn't get excited over a few bombs, but the ones who threw these not only aimed them in rooms where there was no one, but aimed them in rooms where 3 of my daughters sleep. 1 daughter 6, 1 daughter 4, and 1 daughter 2. I heard on the news today that Joseph, a brother that I found in the garbage can in Detroit in 1952, well, that's where I found him, made the statement that I had bombed my own house. Now, you see, this doesn't surprise me, because I know that since many of us left the Muslim movement, its intelligence and its morals have gone bankrupt. Both its intelligence and its morals have gone bankrupt. And now they are using the same tactic that's used by the Ku Klux Klan. When the Klan bombs your church, they say you did it. When they bomb the synagogue, they say the Jews bombed their own synagogue. This is the Klan tactic. And tonight, I'll tell you why the Black Muslim movement is now adopting the same tactics against black people as has been up to now the exclusive method of the Ku Klux Klan. I want to point out, too, that I'm not talking about Muslims just to make white people happy, because I don't believe in letting anyone use me against somebody else. I'm telling you these things because it has reached a point where I feel that black people in this country need to know what's going on. And I'm talking about an organization which I had a hand in building, which I had a hand in organizing.
He'd go throughout the country, he'd go into a city, he'd find somebody who'd be willing to have it in their home. They'd go out and scout up some people and bring them to their home, and he would talk to them in their home. And then he would tell them to go out and bring some people, and they'd go out and bring some more, and he would talk to them. And they would start from that, and from that they'd grow until they reached a point of where they had to have a building where they could meet.
And how many cities did he do this in?
Oh, there's no way of knowing. All over the country, north and south. He'd be on the road sometimes, just day after day after day, just going across the country to cities that he thought had a population of our people that might be willing to listen, and starting it.
As intelligent as the white man is, or has been in the past, if he knew the intensity of the dissatisfaction and impatience that is building up in the minds of the masses of these black people, you wouldn't see him running around here calling Mr. Muhammad a hate teacher. He would look upon Mr. Muhammad as an alarm clock that's doing him a favor, waking him up out of his sleep before it's too late.
He insisted on honesty and in doing the job if you're going to be on it. He didn't require anything of them that he wasn't doing himself. And his act was a hard act to follow. He didn't, many times I used to wonder if he realized that people just couldn't be, in general, just couldn't be as dedicated and committed to a thing as he was. You don't find that many people, you don't find too many people that will commit themselves the way he did. Many nights he wouldn't get but 4 hours sleep, sometimes less. He would go until he just couldn't go any further. And then he'd have to get some sleep, and once he woke up, he'd wake up running.
In the late of the night, I've had the chance to talk. In the early morning hours, I had the chance to talk with him. I do know that he was a loyal follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, to the extent that I perhaps wouldn't have been, or you perhaps wouldn't have been. A loyalty that was unusual.
Representative Powell implied in a statement, I believe it was over the weekend, that he had summoned you to Washington to fill a gap in leadership. Is that correct?
No, Adam Clayton Powell has never summoned me anywhere. Adam Clayton Powell could not summon me. The only man in America who can summon me anywhere is the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The stick that I always used in presenting, representing, and defending the Muslim movement was the fact that it had the ability to reform the morals of the so-called Negro community.
One time I mentioned to the messenger, I said, you know, sometimes people need a chance to relax. Maybe I'll have some parties or something. I was just picnics or just something to get away and break them and get a chance to relax some. And he told me, he said, you know what would happen? He said, if you let them get anywhere near what they used to do, he said, they'll go right back into it. It's just like taking a fish out of water. He said, if you lay that fish on the bank, he's going to flop around till he gets back in the water. And he said, the same way these people will do. He said, if I let them have any kind of freedom, he said, they'll go right back to boogieing and drinking and everything else that they used to do.
The teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is like nothing I have ever taken. It's a medicine.
Right.
You see,
that's
it's a medicine that has cured me of all my ills.
Yes,
because I was a sick man.
That's right.
And when I embraced the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, these teachings cured me of these ills.
Right.
I'm a well man now.
Right.
And I feel good.
That's right. As long as you stay with the doctor, you continue to
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The so-called American Negro have to be completely re-educated. He have to be completely made over.
The messenger had already spoken as the hair should be cut in a neat manner. But Malcolm began to really emphasize the fact that it should be short. He said this showed that you didn't have a lot of vanity.
Started Muhammad Speaks newspaper. And there was a time when I could write this entire paper myself with no office whatsoever other than a room in my basement.
The messenger himself said many times, publicly, that Malcolm had made him a very wealthy man, and this was